so much. Aloha, everybody. Thank you. Have a seat. It's so great to be here with all of you. I want to say thank you to Yao for inviting me here to join you. I think they invited me last year. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it, so I am really stoked to be here with all of you. You know, I don't have to tell you this, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are words that have always been relevant in this country. These are words that have and will always be important. But I think now, possibly, maybe not more than ever, but more than in a really long time, more and more people are waking up to what these words really mean in our everyday lives and why we have to stand up and fight for our freedoms. Growing up in Hawaii, I got to tell you, my childhood kind of embodied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I didn't really have, great philosophical thoughts about the issues of war and peace and foreign policy. Lived in the most remote island chain in the world. Spent my time surfing, martial arts, yoga, reading books. Fourth of 5 kids, parents weren't well off, but we had what we needed. Life was pretty simple. 9/11 happened. Changed everything. Changed everything for me and for all of us. It caused me to ask some questions about what I was doing with my life. It compelled me to want to do something to go after the terrorists who attacked us. I didn't know exactly how or where I could best serve. I was serving in the state legislature when I decided to enlist in the Hawaii Army National Guard, where I could serve both the state and our country together. Now, I was assigned to a medical unit at the time, and our brigade combat team in the Hawaii Army National Guard got called up for a deployment to Iraq in 2004. And for this unit, it was the first deployment, mass deployment since Vietnam. And so most people serving at that time had never been deployed into combat before. I was running for re-election to my state house seat at the time, and my commander called me one day and he said, "Tulsi, good luck. I mean, congratulations, you don't have to go. Your name is not on the deployment roster. We already have somebody filling the position that you're trained for. You get to stay home and continue living your life." I told him, "No, thank you. There's no way I'm going to stay back and watch my brothers and sisters deploy into combat on the other side of the world." But I got to tell you, at that time, I believed what we were being told. I believed Hillary Clinton. I believed George W. Bush when they told us that we had to go because there were weapons of mass destruction and we had to protect our country. Obviously, it all turned out to be a lie. A huge learning experience that ultimately really drove home for me how foreign policy is domestic policy. That we cannot separate the two. Too often in presidential campaigns, we hear about a whole slew of different issues. In a 2 or 3 hour long debate, how much time is actually dedicated to the most important role that the president has, which is to serve as commander-in-chief? Very little. And we end up with the results that we've had for too long. If people didn't realize that foreign policy is domestic policy and that we all pay the price through the trillions of dollars that were wasted, what to speak of the many lives lost in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, then I hope that they're starting to realize it now when we here in America and people all around the world are suffering from this administration's policies as they wage this proxy war against Russia, driving up gas prices, driving up inflation, causing supply shortages and a global hunger crisis. I saw through that deployment how out of touch our leaders are, how little they actually care about the well-being of the American people, how little they actually care about peace and security and prosperity. I remember members of Congress coming to our camp in Iraq, which is about 40 miles north of Baghdad, touching down for a few hours, shaking hands, getting the photo op, and then picking up and leaving, and then laughing as I saw them on television saying, "Yeah, I've been to combat zones 37 times. I know exactly what war is about." How many veterans are here who've been through what I've been through? You know exactly what I'm talking about. They care more about their photo ops, getting reelected, coming back and reporting to their bosses in the military-industrial complex than they are about the actual cost and consequences and effects of war. Both cold and hot war, exactly. Those who keep paying the price. I saw how closely those in power work with the media, using them as their mouthpiece to raise tensions, to beat their war drums. The media not asking any critical questions, not having any real analysis, instead becoming cheerleaders for war themselves. There are so many different examples of this. Obviously, weapons of mass destruction with the war in Iraq. In hindsight, everybody says, well, this was obvious, but nobody asked the questions at the time. And then just recently, before the 2020 election, with President Biden and the 50 high-ranking intelligence officials who said Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation. And they colluded with the media and big tech to completely and immediately silence anyone who dared to push this message. Glenn Greenwald is a good friend of mine, and he lost his job from the media outlet that he co-founded because they censored him. Exactly. And they did this to deliberately interfere in our own democracy and our own election, because they were so afraid that if this information got out, that it would hurt Biden and would allow Trump to get elected. So when our media doesn't ask tough questions of our leaders, when our leaders do not fulfill their constitutional responsibilities, they don't exercise that great caution before deciding to go to war, they don't exercise oversight over the Department of Defense or the intelligence community, the consequences, our democracy suffers. We all lose. I'll never forget when Chuck Schumer on television warned Trump is an idiot to mess with the intelligence community because they can screw you 6 ways from Sunday. The highest ranking Democrat in the U.S. Senate warning the American people, essentially, against messing with the intelligence community because of how badly they can screw you, as though they are some autonomous body of government that is accountable to no one. How can this be America? This goes against the foundation of our government. This goes against these ideals of a government of, by, and for the people. And so the question I've asked myself is, why? Why are they doing this? Why are they working so hard to squash any discussion, squash any debate, squash any questions about whatever war they happen to be wanting to wage at any given time? They're afraid. Recently, Senator Mitt Romney accused me of being a traitorous liar. This, for those of you who don't know, especially for someone who still serves in the Army Reserves, is an offense punishable by death. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. A sitting U.S. senator put out a tweet accusing me of being a traitorous liar. No evidence, nothing to back it up. My offense for stating facts that have been issued by the DOD and other officials within our own government about U.S.-supported biolabs in Ukraine that in a war zone could have very dangerous pathogens that, if released, could cause another global pandemic, and that maybe we should secure those sites. And for that, I was called a traitorous liar. We love you, Tulsi. Thank you. I love you too. And you just heard from Senator Rand Paul. You know, he was the only one in the U.S. Senate when they were trying to pass that multi-billion-dollar funding bill for Ukraine who said, hold on a second, let's just add this little amendment that says we should keep track of where this money's going. We should keep track of how it's being spent. Because frankly, the DOD in our government does not have a good track record of keeping track of where money is spent and where these weapons end up. He was shut down, and he was called a puppet of Putin. All of these reactions point to one thing: their fear and their insecurity, because they can't defend their position. They know that if they are questioned, if they are pressed, that if we shine the light of truth on their position, then they'll be exposed. Their propaganda and their lies will be exposed. They'll be exposed for who they are really serving. Open discourse, debate, and dialogue. This is the heart of our democracy, this marketplace of ideas and our ability to exercise our rights and freedoms to participate in this. We are stronger as a nation when we do. But not only are they willing to stay out of this discussion, they are actively trying to silence those of us who are very involved in it and actively try to censor those who dare to challenge them. James Madison issued a powerful warning. He said, "Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few." In war, too, the discretionary power of the executive is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied. And all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. These same malignant aspects in republicanism may be traced in the inequality of fortunes and the opportunities of fraud growing out of a state of war and in the degeneracy of manners and of morals engendered by both. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. Does this sound familiar to you? Eerily familiar. This is the reality of the world that we are living in right now. And I've got a whole long list of just a few examples. We have the Patriot Act that was supposed to sunset after 9/11, but got rubber stamped and continues to be rubber stamped through Congress every time it's about to expire. You've heard about the secret FISA courts, the NSA mass data collection. We've heard about, and I've experienced, how anyone who speaks out against regime change wars is immediately labeled a dictator lover, an isolationist, and a pacifist. How terrible is it? And what a dark statement it makes to see these politicians who really believe that the only way to de-escalate a conflict or to engage with other countries is through the use of bombs, guns, and sanctions. We've seen most recently the Attorney General targeting dissenters, people who dare to challenge or question quote-unquote anti-authority views, targeting parents who actually care about how their kids are raised and taught and what they're being taught in our schools. We're seeing the rejection of fundamental rule of law, with people like Senator Elizabeth Warren declaring the Supreme Court is illegitimate because she disagreed with their ruling. We see insider trading in Congress. Yep. And a lot of other people from both parties, let's be fair here. We see Steve Bannon found guilty of contempt of Congress, but Attorney General Eric Holder never charged or prosecuted. And we've seen no consequences for people like John Brennan and James Clapper who lied to Congress. Not only have there been no consequences, they have been uplifted and are on your television almost every day as heralded experts in national security and foreign policy. We've seen the Ministry of Truth. And they're trying to make a play on us because so many people stood up and said, hold on a second. So you want to set up a government entity in the Department of Homeland Security to look out for misinformation, but you're going to be the one to tell us what is truth and what is false. You get all the power to do that. And so they said, okay, fine. We're going to set this aside, push pause, get rid of the singing TikTok lady who was supposed to be the expert for misinformation, who said misinformation herself. But they barely waited even a month before they revived this idea, slapped a new name on it, and said Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be in charge instead. Never mind the fact that she wants to be president, and this would be a great political weapon to use to go after shutting up her political opponents. We can't be complacent, is my point. Rather than be disheartened, because it's easy to be disheartened when you see all these attacks coming from all directions. You wonder, man, like they've got all the power, what do? We got to understand why they're doing these things. It's because they're afraid of us. They're afraid of our voices. They're afraid of a free society, afraid of people who actually think for themselves, who ask questions, who think critically and say, wait, this is not aligned with the Constitution of the United States. The decisions these people are making directly undermine the Constitution, directly undermine the very freedoms that are enshrined in that foundation. They're taking advantage of crises, emergencies, and times of war, whether they be cold or hot wars, to empower the security state and infringe upon those rights. And we all know from the recent past that once those rights are taken away, they're very rarely ever given back. I want to talk a little bit about the hypocrisy of the neocon, neolib foreign policy establishment. We got to take this show on the road. Your energy is infectious. Now, we're seeing this hypocrisy play out in this administration, but it's not anything new. We've seen how our military has been misused, being sent out to be the policeman of the world, saying, hey, go overthrow that evil dictator, but we're going to turn a blind eye to this other one because we like them, or we've struck a deal with them. Or exactly. Risking our safety, security, and future, pushing us closer to the brink of nuclear war, all in the name of spreading democracy and defeating autocracy. This is the heart of President Biden's foreign policy, spreading democracy and defeating autocracy. So in order to do so, he says to the American people, we must go to war with Russia, using Ukraine as a proxy, because democracy and freedom everywhere is on the line. But he's exposed the fact that his freedom and democracy mission is a farce, as he just went hat in hand to Saudi Arabia, an Islamic dictatorship where there are so few rights for women that they are celebrating and making global headlines when they say women are allowed to drive. A country that has no free speech, and a country that has no freedom of religion, and a country that remains the biggest sponsor of Islamist terrorism in the world. It doesn't sound very democratic to me. We need to see through this sham and understand the truth of the price that we are paying. Foreign policy cannot be separated from domestic policy. President Biden's willing to spend an unlimited amount of our taxpayer dollars in this mission and wage this proxy war for as long as it takes, saying this is so important that we must be willing to pay the price. Which we is he talking about? It's not him. It's not Kamala Harris. It's not the elite. It's us. It's taxpayers. It's the American people, and frankly, people around the world who are paying the price. He's willing to risk World War III and nuclear war in the name of freedom. And what they don't tell you is that in the event of a nuclear holocaust, there is no shelter for us. They have their bunkers. They will be fine, and they have plans to continue waging war from those bunkers. but the rest of us will be destroyed. I don't know if you saw, New York City recently released a public service announcement telling people what to do in the event of a nuclear attack on New York City. Get inside, stay alert. I'm not joking. You can look it up. They made a video with an actor telling people what to do. Get inside, stay alert. And the best part is, at the very end of it, she says, "You got this." I'm not joking. And this is so funny, but it's not, because there's a reason they're putting this out. Because the people who run the doomsday clock are saying, you know what, we are closer to the brink of nuclear war now than ever. But they're trying to create this false sense of security for people to say, oh, this is today's version of just go hide under your desk. You'll be fine. Nothing could be further from the truth. We went through this in Hawaii. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago in January of 2018, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Missile alert, exactly. Early on a Saturday morning, people are sleeping in, barely waking up. I think it was like 8:17 a.m. I might be off by a couple of minutes. But radio alerts went out, text messages went out saying, missile incoming to Hawaii, take shelter immediately, this is not a drill. And this is happening in the backdrop, again, of Hawaii sitting in the middle of the Pacific, within range of intercontinental ballistic missiles from North Korea, which has nuclear weapons. So at that moment, people thought, this is it. This is the end. Where do I go? It says, take shelter immediately. This is not a drill. There's video of kids on the University of Hawaii campus sprinting from building to building, trying to get in at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. It says, take shelter. Where is their shelter? Where do I go? A good friend of mine has 7 young kids. He literally piled his whole family in the car and started driving towards the mountains to find a cave. A father lowered his little girl, barely 7 years old, down a manhole, telling her, baby, I'll be back, hoping that he would be. Another father had one child on one side of the island with family and the other with friends on the other side of the island, and he was in the middle thinking, I've got 15 minutes to live. Which of my children am I going to spend the last minutes of my life with? This was a serious wake-up call to the reality that we face, that our leaders have failed us by putting us in this position where we are facing this greater threat of nuclear war than ever before. And there is no shelter. There is no plan. Leaders of our past from both parties have recognized the seriousness of this. President John F. Kennedy said, I think the fate not only of our own civilization, but the fate of the world and the future of the human race is involved in preventing a nuclear war. President Reagan, he said, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. To those who protest against nuclear war, I can only say, I'm with you. Like my predecessors, it is now my responsibility to do my utmost to prevent such a war. No one feels more than I the need for peace. Contrast those two leaders from different political parties who both understood the urgent imperative that they faced in their time with the responsibility that they held with their office, to the reality that we face today with a commander-in-chief who is rushing us towards the brink of nuclear war, and with influential people in Washington, the political and the Washington and the war establishment, the media, not recognizing and warning against the seriousness of this threat, but instead saying, well, how do we win a nuclear war? We don't. We don't. That's the point. The world becomes annihilated. This is the failure of the leadership that we're facing. And this leads to the call to action for every one of us. That these moments, as scary and terrifying as they may be, should invigorate and energize us to recognize we must take action. We cannot forget where we came from or the vision that our founders had for this country and for all of us. That they chose very carefully those words that they wrote in the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers. They were very explicit in the thought process behind these words, with the center point being freedom, our right to free speech, our right to protest peacefully, to worship as we choose or not at all, our right to bear arms, to defend ourselves and those we love, and to serve as a check on power to prevent a tyrannical government from infringing on individual rights in a free state. Our right to civil liberties and privacy. Our right to live free. Peace and prosperity go hand in hand. We cannot have prosperity without peace. And we need leaders who have the strength to stand up for peace, to stand up for freedom. In some circles, this is not a popular thing to say, but I love our country. I love our country. And that's why it really breaks my heart to see how our leaders are so willingly eroding the foundation of this country. And then when I see them doing this, I think of my brothers and sisters who served and wore the uniform with pride, paid the ultimate price, and how these people in power who've taken the oath of office, the same oath we took when we enlisted, the same oath that every member of Congress takes when they first are elected and every time they get reelected, to support and defend the Constitution. They dishonor everyone who has paid the ultimate price by essentially throwing the Constitution in the trash and acting for their own selfish interest rather than for the best interest of the country. We can't allow this abuse of power to go unchecked. We have to use our voices. We have to engage in our democracy. Run for office. Elect those you support. Because if we are not willing to take a stand to protect our freedom and democracy, we will lose it. The country we know and love will be gone. We can't sit on the couch, pausing for effect. We can't sit on the couch and thinking someone's going to ride in on a white horse and save the day. No one is coming. It is up to us. By God's grace, we are free, and we will fight together and stand together to remain free. Thank you all so much.